Hello, it's Andreas again. I would like to give you today a fairly comprehensive overview about the Planned Trusted Employer Scheme. The requirements or the announcement was actually published in the regulations 2 days ago on the 11th of October. So what does it mean? Employers who meet certain criteria can now and have 40 days, I think that's until the 20th of November. So interested corporates, employers, can apply at the Department of Home Affairs, and I will later share a little bit how it works. But basically you apply to be registered and acknowledged as a trusted employer, and you will then benefit from a faster processing and also a much easier way of employing foreigners. Okay, so that's a huge benefit. I do think it's very important for a lot of corporates to at least look into criteria and see if they could qualify, because I think it makes your hiring of skills so much easier in the future, and that's obviously the intention of the Department of Home Affairs and the Office of the Presidency who pushed this legislation through. Okay, so you need to express your interest in a certain way until the 20th of November, okay, 2023. That's important. So who can apply or who should not apply? So there's a scorecard, there's 100 points, 80 is the minimum. And then there's 5 criteria. Now, for 2 criteria, you receive, if you meet them, you receive 30 or 20 points and actually 25 points. So if you don't meet 2 criteria, actually you're not going to fall into or you're not going to achieve the 80 points. So I'm going to start with the 2 killer criteria. The 2 criteria you must meet, otherwise you don't even have to consider applying. Okay, so number 1, and that's the first criteria, is really a pledge or an investment into the South African economy in excess of a certain amount, and I will specify that now. So I think it's very important. You must have invested at least 100 million rand in capital expenditures, so not operational expenses, in capital investment into the Republic of South Africa. So not in Africa, it must be in the territory of South Africa. And now comes the very important part, and this must have been done since 2018. So if you invested before 2018, you do not meet the criteria. Okay, it's a strict criteria. So since 2018, 100 million plus investment into South Africa. Okay, that's the one criteria. The other one is that you pledged at the South African investment conferences, and every year our president holds these investment conferences in Sandton. If you pledged in terms of that South African investment conference 100 million or more, then you also might qualify. Okay, so that's one. It's 20 points for 100 million, and it's, I think, 25 points, or actually 30 points, sorry, 30 points for 200 million plus. So that's the killer criteria. If you have not invested since 2018 and it's not capital expenditure, you don't even have to look at this trusted employer scheme. Okay. The second important criteria to meet is the employees. Okay, you must have at least 100 employees. If you don't have 100 employees, you also don't have to apply. And you might now ask, yeah, but I'm using a labor broker and I have outsourced labor, etc., etc. Now they need to be your employees, okay? And you will find in the Government Gazette the annexure or the proof you have to submit to prove the employees. And you can just follow that, and you will see that it potentially refers to your documents you need to submit to the Department of Labor in terms of employment equity. So you can just refer to that. Okay, so 100 employees minimum, otherwise you cannot apply. If you have 150 plus, you get 25 points. If you have 100 or more, you get 20 points. Okay, so these are the 2 most important criteria. The other 3 criteria are the sector, in which sector you belong, the skills transfer, and employment equity or equity equivalence. Actually, it's BE or equity equivalence. So let's look at the sector. The sector is if you belong to energy, renewable energy, energy and infrastructure, you get 15 points. And if you belong to manufacturing, I think services as well as resource-based, you get 10 points, okay? So remember 80 points minimum, so if you don't fall in any of these sectors, you still might actually qualify, okay? Then the skills transfer, basically also there you get 20 points if you have a skills transfer program, a bursary scheme, a graduate development program, so that's another criteria. And then the last criteria is really BE score or status. It's 5 points for 5 to 8 or level 5 to 8, and 1 to 4 is then 10 points, and you also get 10 points for potentially the foreign investors who don't have a BE status, but the equity equivalents agreed with the Department of Trade and Industry. Okay, so that's really in short. And then there's obviously 1 or 2 practical questions. So a group of companies, for instance, how are they treated? And I mean, I watched or I participated in today's seminar hosted by the Department of Home Affairs, and that question came up, and it was very clearly answered. And it was answered that they're looking at a brand, okay? So they're looking at a brand and not particularly in our subsidiary and a sister company. They're looking at the brand or at the holding company. So I think that's good news. The other important part is maybe to quickly discuss now what you have to submit, okay? And that's clearly spelled out in the Government Gazette, published on the 11th of October. There's one criteria which is not really clear. And I want to draw your attention to the fact into which sector you belong. That needs to be confirmed by the Department of Trade and Industry, and it's not really clear how that works. So I reached out to the director, Wilna Barnard, and she shared on the seminar actually and over email with me that it's basically 48-hour turnaround time. You as the corporate, you're going to send basically your basic information company profile to them, and they will then confirm the sector you belong to within 48 hours. So there's no delay for the 40 days, until you need to submit this application. So that's good. But you basically email the DTI, and in particular Wilna Barnard of the DTI, who will then issue this sector confirmation. Okay. The rest of the documents are very clearly stated in the regulation and very clearly, referring to already existing law. So I don't think that's a big hurdle. And then what's the advantage? As I said, the big advantage is then indeed that you can that the foreigner you want to employ has to probably meet much lower criteria. We still don't know really which ones. So that was not really in here in the presentation. Nobody shared that. So we will need to wait what that means. But it was clearly stated from the Department of Home Affairs that otherwise, if the criteria would be too high, it would be preempting the whole effort of this trusted employer scheme. So we foresee that the criteria for the individual, for the foreigner, will be much lower than compared to other work permits. Okay. So overall, I think a good ideas. I think clear criteria. There's not much discretion for the Home Affairs, and the decision is made, by the way, not by Home Affairs. It's by an intergovernmental department meeting. I think the DTI will sit in there, maybe the Department of Labor and the Home Affairs. They usually, the three of them sit together, and the decision will be made by committee and not just by Home Affairs. Okay, so that's also great. The deadline, as I said, 20th November, and they want to basically tell the employers who are applying if they made the threshold and they met the criteria by the end of this year. So by the end of this year, you should know if you're a trusted employer or not. Okay. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. We obviously help you with the applications if you need help. And I look forward to hearing from you. Bye-bye.